Welcome back to the latest episode of the Key and Mang audio experience. I'm your host, Mang, as always, joined by my co-host, Key. Key, what's good?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm chilling, can't complain. Today, we got another special one for you guys. We got a clinic owner out in Miami, Florida, co-owner of Old Blue Athletics, physical therapist, strength coach, University of Miami grad, Katie Dabrowski. Katie, how are you?
That was a wonderful intro. Thank you. I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here, guys.
Oh, thanks for having us. I thought Ryan might love the University of Miami plug, so I had to make sure I got it in there.
I knew you kind of did that for him. That's cool.
Of course. But we just want to say thank you for coming on the show, and we wanted to start out if you could kind of tell us a little bit about how you got to the point where you're at right now.
Yeah, for sure. I had kind of an unconventional route to PT school. I studied neuroscience in undergrad and thought I was going to do the research route. So I was, like doing a lot of research, trying to get publications, trying to get into the PhD world. And I was working in a spinal cord injury and brain injury lab on microscopes all day, hanging out with rats, kind of having that realization that maybe this isn't for me. I think there were days where I didn't talk to another human. So it's like, maybe this isn't the right thing. On the first floor of the lab, there was a physical therapist who ran the rehab program. And I got to see her working with all of the patients, actually doing stuff with the clinical trials. And it kind of made me realize that there was this whole other side to PT that involved research and education in addition to treatment. And I kind of had this epiphany. So I talked with her, had a meeting, kind of told her what I was thinking. And she told me I should look into the University of Miami for PT school. So I completely rerouted everything. I had already graduated undergrad at this point. I was, trying to go to PhD programs. So it took me 3 years after undergrad to kind of do some prereqs and do some shadowing and figure out that I wanted to do PT. So I did that. And at the time I was every 21-year-old, it's my life's over. I'm not doing the plan that I thought. This is all horrible. I'm so behind. And I ultimately, ended up getting into the University of Miami, and it was the best decision I ever made. And yeah, so it was a kind of roundabout way to get there, but it ultimately, I think it was a really good decision. So I went through PT school. I love neuroscience, I always have, but I didn't really want to do neuro PT. So I realized, hey, I can combine a lot of things that I love. I like the neuroscience of movement and things that, I can kind of go into later that I work on with patients, but the ortho world is really my bread and butter. So after going through internships, I was kind of like, man, this multiple patients an hour thing isn't for me. I think I want to do it a little different. So I was working as a personal trainer at a gym down in Miami during school, and the owner was pretty awesome. He said, if you want, when you're ready, you can see some patients here. You can do a little cash PT kind of pop-up situation. He didn't charge me rent. He was very understanding that I was a new grad and broke. And we set up a fair percentage to kind of get me started. So that's where I first started. This is a different place than I'm at now. I did that as soon as I graduated, which was terrifying. But I told myself I kind of just had to make it work if I really wanted to do this, if I wanted to do a cash-based business model. So I made it work, and then ultimately met my current business partner, the owner of Old Bull, who I now co-own with him, a year later. So it's been quite a journey, a little scary at times, but ultimately ending with the cash practice that I run now.
What was appealing about going the cash cash pay route versus going the insurance model for you?
Yeah, and I want to preface all of this by saying that this isn't bashing insurance PT or isn't bashing any other type of physical therapy that isn't what I'm doing. I just, with my background in strength and conditioning and personal training and just my viewpoints on how important it is to really put people through the right amount of intensity for rehab to get them back to what they want to do. I just knew I couldn't really offer that in a more traditional setting, especially in Florida. I mean, reimbursement is really low. So most of these places where you're taking insurance, you're going to have to see multiple people at once. And I was feeling burnt out in my internships as a student. And I was like, oh no, this is terrifying. Like seeing 3 patients at once. I'm not even in the profession yet. And I don't think I want to do this. And it was really scary. And I just had this vision of being a place where we could offer everything on the spectrum of, that's my dog coming in. Hi, bud. Where we could offer everything on the spectrum of, rehab, training, performance, conditioning, all of the above. And kind of trying to re-educate the community on like just what we can do. And I don't think it's as possible in an insurance model, unfortunately. We have to be good and deliver because we are referral based. I don't have a physician sending me people from surgeries. I don't have an insurance company partnering with me, sending me people. So I wanted to make sure that I was motivated to elevate the experience even more. And those are some factors that went into it.
How did you start getting your patients or clients to like buy in and trust you and like build that clientele?
Yeah, and I'll just because my business venture now is with Old Bull, I'll kind of talk about it how we do there because that's really more of like what my baby is now compared to when I started in the beginning. But yeah, that was the scary part. I mean, in the beginning, man, I listened to every Cash PT podcast you can imagine. I was reading every book about business and like, cause we go to PT school, we don't learn business. I was like, I don't even know what any of this means. Like, this is a terrible mistake. And learning about all these things for selling. And it ultimately came down to like, in the beginning, I had scripts and I had like charts that I made to show how much people would save money by over time going cash versus doing insurance, showing all of this stuff. And I found myself never even pulling it out and just having a conversation with the person and just meeting them where they were at and showing them by how much time I could give them, how much value was going to be there. At first, it took some more convincing, right? It was just me. Like they didn't have, hear of a reputation or know why they should do cash. This was even a few years ago when I don't think as many people knew about going the cash route. Like I think it has gotten more popular. But at the end of the day, it came down to just creating value with how I showed them how I was going to work with them and how very specific everything I was doing with them to show them this is very different of an experience you're going to get where you're going to be with multiple people. You're going to be on a table in a gym that looks like it hasn't been, redone since 1985. And I'm not going to put electrodes on you. So just showing the value over time transitioned from me feeling like I really did have to sell to now where people come in knowing the reputation of the gym and knowing what they're going to get. And they don't even care that we don't take insurance. I was just talking to some of my PTs this week about what a shift it's been, because I really did used to feel like I was like a salesperson. And I think you do have to start that way and kind of talking about why it's important to go cash and dancing around the fact that, yeah, it's a little more expensive, but it's better. Whereas now we have people who want to get better and they know they can get better faster and they don't care that it costs upfront what seems like a little bit more. And we had people this week saying you guys could raise your rates to whatever and we would come back, which is crazy. Whereas in the beginning, again, I remember being so nervous talking about this stuff. Like I just felt like a salesperson and it wasn't me. But I think once the reputation starts to come and people start to realize that they're getting a different experience, where they walk in the gym and they see that there's 2 squat rigs, there's a rack of kettlebells, they have everything they need to get back to what they want to do. Like if you're coming to a therapist because you've had a bad experience before, the cash rate isn't as much of a problem either.
Sorry, man, you could go.
I was going to say, when did it start to shift for you that you knew that, oh, I provide immense value and my people are getting better faster? Like when did that happen and what did that do for your confidence?
I think as PTs and as good PTs, like you guys sitting here as well, we're always going to think that we're not doing enough. And we're always going to have that like imposter syndrome. Like every time I get online and I read something new, I'm like, I have to change everything I do about my practice. Like it's so overwhelming all of the time, but that means you're good. That means you care so much that you know that what we know is like this much of the big picture. And that's why this is such a cool profession and people do it for 20 years because there's so much to learn along the way. So I always have that in the back of my head, no matter what, that doesn't go away. But I definitely think just seeing people's reactions and seeing people when they come in, like, I'm sure you guys remember experiences in internships too, where it just looked like people did not want to be there. And even no matter how nice and bubbly you are and how fun you are, like there's like smooth jazz playing, everyone's hooked up to ultrasound and nobody wants to be there. I think the biggest thing was just seeing other people's reactions and them getting excited to come in. And that was like this epiphany moment where it's like, we're creating a place that people are excited to come to. I think another key thing was that most people that I work with traditionally for like a rehab stance or just, pain mitigation or whatever, transition fully into performance type or even strength training. So most of my clients I've had for, if I actually looked at some of the metrics more recently, 6 months plus, well after we've worked on their injury. Like I have people that I've worked with for a couple of years now because we kind of tease out different things that they want to work on. And then ultimately we end up doing whatever strength and performance stuff is going to get them to be better at what they're doing on their own. So stuff like that, like the continuity of care or where people are always coming back. That was huge for confidence for sure. And then as you asked, like just straight up how fast people are getting better, I've gotten more comfortable and trusting in what I can deliver to somebody to work on their own in conjunction with me, to not bog them down with coming in with like extreme frequency unless they want to, because it is a higher price point. So I have a lot of clients who are very, very active and motivated already, where if I give them stuff to do, and we see each other, say once a week for like 6 to 8 weeks, they're going to get better because they're so motivated to get back to CrossFit. They're a trainer themselves and they want to get back to being comfortable training their clients. So I think the development of kind of the client like archetype that works best has also shown that, wow, people are getting better faster because they're coming here knowing, okay, I can do some work on my own and I can come in a little bit and not break the bank and have awesome results. So all of that kind of comes together. But again, like, I don't think we ever think we're good. I think we always think that we have more to learn, but that's why like our patients are lucky,
I agree. For the clients that aren't as active, do you see that they're like intimidated initially, like walking into your gym, seeing like all of the squat racks, all the heavy equipment, and they're probably saying like they don't do any of this stuff, and then do you ever see that you transition them to like having a different mindset and actually wanting to live a more active lifestyle?
This is such a good question. While our gym, obviously, like when you walk in, it looks like it's for, professional athletes. Like it's beautiful and it has everything you would ever need. And then there's like someone in the background, like one of the PTs in the background, like squatting a ridiculous a bunch of weight. It can look totally intimidating. But if you actually broke down the demographics of our clientele, they are middle-aged weekend warriors. So I actually don't see pro athletes. I don't see people who maybe looking at the gym, people would expect. Like my favorite thing in the world is getting somebody of just general activity level able to keep doing their general activity again. Like that to me is the most rewarding thing because it's people like us. While I work with CrossFitters and personal trainers and people who are of elevated physical fitness, it's still the vast majority is kind of this general population who just wants to move well. With that, there's definitely people who have never been in a gym before, or they walk in and they're like, oh God, maybe this isn't for me. And as soon as they see the general demographic and how everybody acts and hangs out and is super casual together, I've had many people tell us that, yes, when they first walked in, they thought like, oh, this is only for athletes. And they soon learn that we treat everybody like an athlete. Like it sounds kind of gimmicky, but really, truly the conversation I have with people is, I don't want to treat pro athletes. I want to make you feel like a pro athlete with the level of service that we provide and what you have access to. And that very quickly shifts gears and makes people feel super comfortable. We have people all the time, and I'm sure you guys get this too, like, I never in a million years thought I was going to be doing this. Like, I never thought I could pick up a kettlebell. I never thought I could deadlift. And what we're really passionate about is making these things that seem like just what weightlifters do or just what athletes do is stuff for everybody. Like, I'm not teaching somebody to deadlift because they need to deadlift. They need to pick stuff up off the floor, but it happens to be with a kettlebell, and they happen to feel awesome when they do it. So it definitely, I'm sure people have some reservations at first, but once they get in and see what we're doing, they're like, okay, this is actually for me too, which is really cool.
I had a question, just kind of hearing about like you're like deep in it and like you lift and you make sure you keep yourself healthy and strong. You recently had a post about like if you need to go back to lifting after pain or injury, it's kind of cool when your medical provider lifts too and can help get you there.
Yeah.
We have been having this discussion. We've had a couple of discussions about this, about how sometimes it just helps with like the buy-in if your medical provider can do the things that you're instructing them to do.
Totally. Yeah.
And we've had kind of different arguments or discussions about some people are like, well, if I don't lift, does that mean I can't teach people how to lift? And we're just like, what are your thoughts on being able to lift and perform all the movements versus not being able to, but still being involved in the lifting, strength and conditioning world?
Yeah, and maybe my opinion might ruffle some feathers, but I think that the best person to teach something is somebody who does it themselves. With that being said, I do think there's a lot of stuff from our knowledge of anatomy, biomechanics, physiology, all of that stuff that makes us way better than the average person able to help somebody who lifts and needs to get back to their sport. Like, I don't do every sport that I work with somebody who needs to get back to, right? Like, I work with somebody who does jujitsu and an Olympic sailor. I don't do either of those things. I don't think that those are prerequisites of me needing to be able to instruct them. But I do have people on staff who work specifically with rotational athletes, soccer players, stuff that's not really my expertise. So I will give them to them because they've all played those sports. I think there's a back and forth on it. When it comes to lifting, I do think because it's a lot of it is very like biomechanical and a lot of it is very just like angles. And if you understand that, I think you could be a fine coach to help somebody. But ultimately, I think when I work with CrossFitters or like Olympic lifters or anybody who has very technical components of their lift, I think having the background is pretty necessary. And again, this is not saying that PTs who don't lift are bad. Like, that's not even remotely true. I don't believe that for a second, especially since I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing we should be doing is helping people to find whatever they like to do for movement. And maybe your PT just isn't into lifting, but they love yoga or they love something else. Like, that's our whole message at the end of the day, right? Like, whatever you like to do is going to be the best exercise. But if I want to get somebody back to CrossFit who needs to snatch, who needs to do all of these specific type of movements, like, I think I should probably know how to do them too, because I need to coach them through it. And I need to know what different parts of the lift feel like to coach them through it, and to know common positional faults and common things that are associated with the lift that they're just going to have a better experience if their clinician does it too. I don't think it's necessary for all of sports and all of ortho, but if you have somebody specifically who's a strength athlete, I think it makes a difference. And again, this topic is tough because I don't want it to be like offensive to people who don't lift weights, because there's nothing wrong if you don't want to. I think you should. I think it's good for your health. But I do think that I've had more success with, say, like a CrossFit athlete than if they were to go to other places. And most of them have told me that they've tried other stuff and had no results because they're being severely underdosed and their clinician doesn't understand what movements they need to get back to, or they're giving them a statement of just don't do that anymore. And if you tell a CrossFitter not to go to CrossFit, they're going to go crazy. It's like telling a runner not to run. Like, we have to come up with ways to modify. So a lot of the people that I work with, I understand the WOD system. I understand, if I look at a list of the exercises, I tell them, these are things we should modify. The rest you're good for, go for it. So I think it's really important when we get into like the niche areas of strength, if your clinician understands that.
that was a great answer, but I just wanted to circle back to transitioning your clients from that rehab point and when they're starting to feel better and transitioning them into more of the wellness. How do you go about that? And is that a conversation you find yourself suggesting to them, or do you see that they're asking you like, hey, what's the next step? Like, can I continue?
Yeah, the both. I think that's what helps with the cash-based route too, because it's a little bit more of, it's like an easier transition, right? Like, okay, instead of us doing what would be deemed medically necessary PT now, we're going to shift gears and focus more on performance, strength, not necessarily treating an injury, not necessarily treating pain, but just giving like more of that wellness opportunity. So it's a little bit less of, I think, a difficult conversation than maybe someone who would be transitioning from using insurance to all of a sudden not. Like, they're already paying the same rate. We charge the exact same rate for physical therapy and training because our mission is to basically show that it's all the same. It's a spectrum of where you're at. So that makes the transition pretty easy. And a lot of times people are like, why would I go somewhere else to a trainer who doesn't know my medical history, who doesn't know my background? And instead, I could stay here and work with you. And then if anything pops up, we can address it. That's been the biggest thing and why people find value in the long haul process. But I definitely get a mixture of both where, and plenty of people who we straight up discharge, right? Like, I've gotten them their goals and they're super autonomous and they know what they need to do. And it's been, 6 sessions and they're good. And maybe they already work with a trainer, or I'm working in conjunction with them and their trainer already. Like, that totally happens. But I have plenty of people who are kind of like, you know what? I think I want to keep working on just getting stronger so this doesn't happen again. Or they're a runner and they're like, whoa, you've shown me how important strength training is. Can we do some maintenance once a week where we just do some strength? Like, totally. So it's definitely a mixture of both. And then of course, that third group of people who they were probably already pretty independent before and don't need a trainer per se. Or maybe they just need, like, I have a lot of people who just will keep an appointment on the books like once a month for maintenance to check in. And we're just kind of like, a way that I've kind of more recently started to describe like what we offer is more that we're kind of like consultants for people on their health and wellness journey. So they know that they have somebody that they can check in with and make sure everything's going well, make sure their own programming is going well. Like, I have people who come in and just want to talk about what they're doing for programming. And if I see any gaps, if I see anything where like, hey, we could add this in and you'd probably be more well-rounded. So there's just a lot of opportunities, I think, to coach people on what else we can offer other than like the strict sense of we rehab an injury.
I like kind of having all that. You can have that conversation at the beginning, you can have it throughout and at the end too. So it's like always coming back to it, but you're catering to what that person needs in front of them at that time and whatever they're trying to get back to. So I really like that. Can you run us through what a initial eval looks like your day one, first time meeting them in the clinic, what that kind of looks like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So and again, I think we just all evolve over the years, but I've made my first eval a lot more trying to get the person to open up and be comfortable and talk and to show them that like we're lucky. We get to spend the most time with any person out of any medical provider, regardless of setting, even in a busier clinic setting. So I kind of want to show that to people by like, all right, let's sit down and chat. We have a whole hour to talk about the things that are bothering you. And I think that's especially for the people who tend to be drawn to our type of practice, who've had bad experiences with PT before. They have a certain thing that they really want to get back to. And they tend to be, of a level of understanding of how important their health and wellness is to them. Again, they're not being sent to me, they're coming to me. So to have a provider who's like, cool, let's tell me about you. That I think has been a shift where instead of doing endless tests and measures, like maybe I would have done before, because in school we're thinking of this like checklist we have to go through. Now I'm like, all right, if I see this person move and I hear them talk to me and I know the demands of what they have to get back to, I have a pretty good idea of what's going on and what I can start with. So I'm not going to poke and prod them for an hour straight. I'm going to let them talk. I'm going to develop a relationship and learn the thing that is really bothering them that they can't get back to. That's more important than anything else. So I've shifted into more of that for sure over the years. So definitely chatting in the beginning, we're getting to know each other. What's your background? What's the thing that you can't do that you want to get back to? And then I always make sure along the way, like I'm constantly asking if they have questions, if they have feedback, if there's anything else that I'm missing, to make sure that they know that like they're basically in control. I remember in PT school, we were taught, and again, this probably was for like busier clinics, but I remember being taught about like polite ways to cut your patient off if they're talking too much. And I'm like, what? like what? Like to speed the process along. And now in practice, I'm like, how messed up is that? This person is vulnerable and in pain and wants to talk to you. And you're taught to how to get the process moving along so it doesn't take too much time. And I don't really subscribe to that anymore. So then we talk a lot about, I want to make sure, you know, have you had PT before? What's your perception of PT? How do you think I can help you? Because that's where I find right away what they've done in the past, which probably was passive modalities and stuff that they didn't feel a ton of result from, or what they've been told from other providers. Like I'm bone on bone and my doctor says it's all over. Like, what have they been told before about what they're dealing with and how do they feel about that? And then where can I come in and be like, well, actually, here's what's going on. I have this really awesome anatomy app on my computer, Essential Anatomy. I don't know if you guys have ever used it. And we have a skeleton, and I always make sure like to go over the parts of the body with them that we're working on so they know what it looks like. And they're usually like, whoa, that's cool. And then nobody's usually taken the time to show them that. So I want them to get acquainted with the area and what's going on. So it's not this mystery where they hear the word meniscus and they're like, I have no idea what that means. So that's a huge part of it. It's a lot of talking, a lot of education. And then my assessment, while I have buckets of things I'm looking at, it really does change per each person. I don't really think it makes sense to have a standardized assessment for every single person who walks in because everybody does different stuff. So it's a lot of movement assessment rather than arbitrary strength testing. It's a lot of like if it let's say it's a lower body person, it's a lot of single leg strength testing to see any discrepancies, special tests when needed, but I'll be honest, I don't do them. And it's very, very little of maybe what you would see traditionally with MMTs and things like that. Because unless somebody presents in a way that makes me think that would be necessary, if they have neurosymptoms and I need to check things like that. But otherwise, it's a lot more movement specific and them showing me positions that they need to be in for whatever their sport activity or lifestyle is. I always try to wrap up with talking about the findings, and you know, obviously anything that we find that we have time to work on, we start working on. But I always make sure we have time to wrap up the findings, and I kind of shift it on them and ask them what their big takeaways are from the assessment. It's so much more education focused than maybe I would have done initially, because I truly think a person's going to get a lot more out of the experience of being able to talk about what's going on and my findings than them being like, well, she pushed me around on the table for a long time, wrote stuff down really fast, and I don't really know what's going on. I try to really emphasize the education. Unless necessary, I don't necessarily give an ICD diagnosis to a person. I'm not going to say you have piriformis syndrome or something that sounds life-threatening. I'm usually just talking about the things that are in my findings and what opportunities we have to get them better. So, for example, I had a CrossFitter who had a subscap tear, like the positive liftoff sign, and she was having pain overhead with, you know, basically everything she was doing. And I showed her the rotator cuff, I showed her everything, and was basically like, this muscle right here needs to be a lot stronger. Here's a typical timeline for when we see that happening. This is why it's going to be uncomfortable to go overhead, because this muscle is really, really weak right now. So going overhead is not going to feel good. And just kind of explaining things like that instead of being like, you have a subscapularis tear. Like that sounds terrifying. So it's so much more of just easing the person into the rehab process.
I love that, because I think saying certain things to patients can deter them from doing a lot of things, and like we can just instill a lot of fear in them for no reason at all. But there are some times where people want a diagnosis, like they like the certainty, and they're not uncomfortable with just that answer. So how do you deal with that? Like if somebody wants a diagnosis?
Then I'll give them as much information as they want, right? I think it's about, at the end of the day, like what I think we're all getting better at as we learn so much about individuality of the patients that we work with is like matching the style of the patient. So I will always, if they really want a specific diagnosis, I'll first tell them that the body doesn't work in codes and a specific diagnosis isn't going to look the same for anybody. So I'll tell them the things that are my findings and maybe give them names of muscles or ligaments or tissues. And if it is like a muscle strain, for example, kind of talk them through the process of the grading system and where I think they're at. So I'll give that for sure. Again, if it's necessary, right? Like if this is a person who's super high level and if I don't tell them something specific, they're going to go and sprint and like re-tear their hamstring. I need to know, you can kind of match that patient, right? So a lot of it is like me trying to assess maybe what their communication style is and how that would help them with what I tell them. But I'll definitely give somebody who wants more specifics, I will give them more specifics. I've just found that most of the time for most things as well, like the treatment looks so similar in terms of we're just getting people stronger. Like I always joke with people where I find something that hurts, I grade you into going back into that position again. Like that's what my job is. So for so many things, it's so unnecessary to be like so nitpicky about it unless it's what the person's asking for. So it's definitely matching communication styles, which is what I do with everything, every aspect of the eval anyway, right? Like we always have to make sure, like if you're somebody that's a little bit more joking, if I get someone who's super serious, I'm like, all right, Katie, calm it down. Like he's not gonna think this is funny, be more serious. So I'm always trying to make sure I match, and that happens often, so.
Was there, you kind of talked a lot about how you've evolved as a person and therapist over the last couple of years. Can you kind of dive into what that transition was like when it was just you to now you hiring other people onto your team? Was that a hard transition for you going from totally solo to now asking for more, getting more help to allow you to have more time to do other things?
I still don't have time, first of all. Let that be clear. But that's a really good question. No, I mean, the first person I hired, her name's Hannah. You've probably seen us doing crazy things. She was doing the pistol squat off of me in a bridge. Highly recommend. She actually, and this is how it's been for most people, she actually just kind of cold emailed me saying, hey, I like what you guys do. Are you hiring? And I was like, oh, I could hire people. I almost didn't have this thought process because I had been doing it by myself and I kind of really didn't think anything of it. And I wasn't necessarily looking. And when we did the interview, I was like, oh my gosh, this girl is exactly, this is perfect. And she joined the team, fabulous. Same thing with Tim, he's our sports specialist. He's amazing. And he straight up cold emailed us. So we get people asking to work with us instead of actively, which is really the coolest feeling and mind-blowing in the world. So the people that work with us are so highly motivated themselves that it does not feel like I have an additional responsibility by them being there. It just feels like, whoa, I have now 2, 3, 4, 5 other people who are so good at their jobs that now our entire brand has been elevated exponentially. So it doesn't feel at all like a burden or like it's more on my plate or that it was much of a transition, other than I just see the growth and like the big picture of the team expanding every day. Like you have those crazy moments where you walk in and you're like, I can't believe this is happening. I get that all the time still, where I walk in and I joke about the weeks where I had like 2 patients and I was like, this is a good idea, Katie. This is fine. How are you going to pay rent? And now I have 3 clinicians who, in addition to myself, 3 other PTs who are constantly 30 to 40 patients a week. And I'm like, what? Like there was a time where I was not really sure, if this was the right decision in the growth phase. So the transition has been nothing but positive. It's been huge. It's been great to see and to learn from other people because obviously I started something as a new grad. So having other people to bounce ideas off of is the greatest thing in the world. So it's been a very, very positive transition. It's humbling for sure, because I think of where we started, but then it just gets me even more excited. So it's been good.
So coming into like, love that it's all been positive and you kind of create an environment that fostered the right people to come into your world.
Mhm.
What were some of the things that were unexpected in like expanding or opening your own business that you weren't ready for, but obviously you're able to combat it with like with where you're at now. But what were some of the things that you weren't expecting when you were like opening the business?
That's a good point. I think the biggest thing as I was hiring more people was realizing how important it is to have like processes written down and planned out. Because I got to a point with a couple, like one person that I was kind of onboarding, but it was a temporary thing. I wasn't sure if it was a good fit. It ended up, he went a different direction. He's great, but it just wasn't the right fit. But I remember being extremely overwhelmed and stressed with realizing how much work I still had to do with my patients and then teaching him everything about how we operate. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is unsustainable. Like it was so stressful that I had this big realization being like, oh wow, this is what happens when small businesses grow. Like I had to write standard operating procedures. I had to have basically every question that somebody could ask already. It's in the document, you can look there, of course, with answering and fielding as I go. But that was a huge eye-opening experience where again, for a long time it was just me, or it was just one other person who was kind of Hannah grew with the development of the company as well. So it was stuff where like in the moment we kind of talk through things, but with hiring people completely new, I realized how much stuff where I'm like, oh yeah, that should be written down somewhere. There's all these moments when I had that thought. So it was extremely stressful putting it all together. But now I have this, living and breathing document that I'm changing and adding to as I get more questions and as I get more things where I'm like, oh yeah, they should know exactly where in our EMR to click that to do this, and just stuff that I had done on autopilot. That was really stressful. That's when I think I started to be like, whoa, this is getting big and this is kind of getting overwhelming. But as soon as I pivoted and worked on that side of it, it helped a lot. My business partner, Frankie, is also incredible. He's a trainer and exercise physiologist, so he's not a PT. He started Old Bull back in like 2017, and then I brought PT in 2019. So he already had this amazing business that as soon as I met him and saw the gym, I was like, yeah, this is what we want to do. He is incredible at all of the behind the scenes stuff. Like he did the Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business program. So he actually knows some things that we were never taught in PT school. And he is so helpful. It's insane. Where like we complement each other really well, where we're both kind of good at the things that the other person maybe doesn't like. So that's been even bigger, is having somebody like him where he really, really helps with the growth side of things. So I can treat and I can build the PT program. So it's been, there's things like that were with the growth side of it that absolutely come unexpected. And you're like, oh, it's not just me anymore. Somebody needs to know all the stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis without it being written down. So, and then on top of that, I think the best part of it has been the relationship and impact with the community that I didn't necessarily expect. Coral Gables is a really cool like pocket of Miami that there's a ton of small businesses. Like everybody there, they have kind of their small business where they get their hair done, their small gym they go to. Like it's a really cool community of that side of small business. So one thing I just didn't expect was now we're a part of that, and it's really cool. And I never felt a huge connection to Miami, I'll be honest. Like when I went here for PT school, it was fun. I love the University of Miami, but I didn't really see myself staying necessarily. And now that I'm here and I feel that Old Bull has become like a household name in the community, is so cool and so unexpected. Like I'll be walking around my neighborhood with my Old Bull hat on, and people were like, oh, you guys are Old Bull, Katie and Frankie. And I'm like, what? It's so crazy. So that part of it has been amazing. Just being a part of the community, like as a place that people trust, has been the best part for sure.
So it sounds like being able to find the right partner, business partner, writing down all your systems and processes and streamlining that, and being a part of the community is like some of the most important things is what it sounds like to me. What sounds like most some of the important things that kind of helped you get along this journey. I
Sure.
was kind of curious about that collaboration with Frankie and how you knew that he was the right person for you to be, because I know you guys are kind of like yin and yang with you're good at things, he's good at things, and it kind of complements each other. But like for someone trying to collab with someone and open up a small business or something like that, what are things that you look for in Frankie, or what are things that Frankie looked for in you that helped make that connection possible?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when I first met Frankie, so I was coming to Old Bull, to the gym, to train with one of his trainers for fun because I knew him and he was one of my friends. And I think he overheard us talking and he was like, "Are you a PT? We should talk." And I think he was so motivated right away as soon as he found somebody that he was like, "I think that we're kind of similar in how we think about health and wellness." That he was like, "We're gonna have a lunch meeting." I was like, "All right, well, fine." And I told him, I was very honest, that I was already starting a practice where I had started my practice and that I wanted to see where that would go. But if he had some clients for me to see, buddy, if he had some clients for me to see, that I would, for 1 day a week, and kind of give him a year of doing that and see how it went. He immediately did an excellent job of showing me what it would be like if I was his partner. So he immediately, with that conversation, talked to me about plans for the business, was consulting me for decisions already, and made it very obvious that he was serious about it. So Frankie's the type of person that if he says something, it's done in the next 20 minutes. Like, he is so efficient, it's insane. And to see how he was showing me already what the relationship would was a huge eye-opening experience. Like, he presented an idea and was serious about it. So that was huge. He also, the way that he already like treated his employees and considered them as colleagues and not employees, the same way that I consider everybody that I work with, we all work together. He's fun, he's silly, but he's also very serious when it comes to growing the business. And he created this environment that was just enjoyable for everybody to be in. And he wants everybody to grow. He's not one of the type where, okay, cool, we're gonna do this and then sell and dip out. Like, he wants everybody to be a part of it. And I think that was also very, especially we're the same age, we're young, like we're at the time we were like 27 years old. And I was like, to see somebody like that so young have that mindset is crazy. So that was huge. I think just the willingness for him to open up and to show me what working with him was going to be like, made our year agreement change to, in about 4 months, I was like, let's do this. So he knew what he was doing. And I think finding somebody that you don't mind talking to all the time is important, because we are constantly in communication. Whereas I think with some partnerships, you see their name pop up. He's literally popping up on my phone right now. You see their name pop up on your phone. You're like, let's just see what he wants. It's Sunday. And I'm like, what's up, Frankie? What you doing? And I think to have that, and like that relationship with your business partner is huge as well, where it's like, it's not a bother if he texts me at 4:30 in the morning and tells me that he applied for a grant because he couldn't sleep. I just make fun of him for it. But I think where you have a relationship where you really enjoy working with each other is big. That can be hard, because going into business maybe with somebody who is your friend first, partner second, I think could be tough for some people. But if you both have the same viewpoints, and the goals for what your business could be, like, that's important. Think about the big picture. I think a lot of times on the surface, partners can look like they're aligned in what their goals are, but maybe one person is trying to sell and dip out and the other person's trying to create this like transformation. So make sure that that's not the case. I think one of the biggest telling moments, it was like, maybe it was this Thanksgiving. Frankie had texted me, because I just texted him like happy Thanksgiving and like grateful for you, love you, all of that. And like one of the things that he wrote back was like, I'm so excited that we're changing healthcare together. Like, that's a partner, right? Like, that is a partner, not like let's sell the business and buy a yacht, like that's a partner. And we are so motivated on the big picture, both of us. It's the coolest feeling in the world having that person on your team.
Love that. Love that. Sorry, Key. Go ahead, Key.
No, I was gonna say, what is like the big picture for you?
Good question. I think so. A lot of things. This is where I get overwhelmed, but in a good way, because I have like a list of all these things that I want to do. I'm sure you guys feel similarly. Yeah, you're podcasting on a Sunday. You get it. So big picture, we'd love to have more locations in the South Florida area with the same exact model. The PT trainer combo. And we'd like to grow 3, 4, or 5 of those locations. And big picture, we'd love to do something on the education and consulting side. So helping PTs grow cash-based practices, kind of the ins and outs of what they need to do. I think that's a huge opportunity. I always tell Frankie this because he's not a PT, but I don't think he realizes how crazy it is that we have a 100% cash-based practice with 4 PTs who are at capacity. Like, that's extremely rare. Like, to have that many people buy into using cash. Like, we don't even do out of network. We are straight cash. So I always tell Frankie, like, you don't even get, this is nuts. This is insane that people are doing this. And this shows how good this team is. So if we can, and we've already within our bubble, in my opinion, changed the perception of what good PT care is. So if we can do that with multiple locations and change the idea in a regional type way of what good care is, like, that's the main goal for sure. And then on top of that, what we would love to down the line is do actual like continuing education seminars from the business side and from like the PT and training side, where, we go and give talks and things like that, kind of like a lot of the other like Rehab to Perform. I know they do a lot of really good seminar stuff. So that stuff down the line for sure. We'd love to maybe even one day, sponsor like a residency program. But these are all big future ideas, but I think it all comes back to education. We want to find ways to help other people create atmospheres like we've been able to create, because that's what wins the most, right? Like, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, just if one clinic is doing all this cool stuff, it's like, if we can get so many more PTs to do this and to have like a blueprint for how to do it, that's what we want to do ultimately.
Speaking of education, I just got out of school. Key just got out of school recently, and we it's kind of fresh in the mind of what PT school is teaching students and stuff. And I just wanted your thoughts on what you think, how you would like to see the PT education system.
This is a great question too. Yeah, that's really tough. So I go back and forth on this. Where did you guys go to PT school?
I went to Mass General in Boston.
Nice.
I went to the University of Hartford in Connecticut.
Okay, great. So you guys all went to excellent programs too. So I feel like this is hard. So I almost feel bad for people who are starting PT school right now, who are exposed to the world of cool PT on Instagram, and they're going to get to school and be like, what is this professor from 1950 teaching me? Like, I almost feel bad because you're so exposed to the after, right? Like, you're so exposed to the cool side of PT where there's cash based and all these like sexy, exciting things. Where I'm almost glad that wasn't really the case when I was in school, where like I just sat and learned and wasn't like, looking at Instagram and seeing maybe what I was going to be doing in the future. I think it's hard when you're presented with the foundational stuff where some of it might not be up to date with a lot of the evidence. But this foundational stuff that I think it's important for learning and the way that we learn to create critical thinking skills and a basis, where from there you can start to formulate your own ideas and formulate your own opinions and get into practice and really become the clinician you want to be. So I think there's value in some of the ways that it is right now. But I will say, I don't use much of anything from school, other than the anatomy, physiology, neuroscience, like the biomechanics, the textbook stuff. Treatment wise, I really don't use a ton. And I don't know if you guys feel similarly, but it's a lot more of like, I've just in clinical practice and in keeping up with literature, everything, my paradigm has shifted for a lot of things. I think we're taught a little bit more of a traditional way, and we're also taught surface level, right? Like, I think we often forget that when we're in PT school, we learn how to be a pediatric therapist, an orthotherapist, an acute care therapist, a cardio therapist, a neurotherapist. We learn all of that stuff, so you can only learn a little bit of it. We're taught to be generalists, and that's so unlike any other profession where, like, tomorrow, if you wanted, you'd be like, I'm gonna do cardio PT. Like, that's crazy. It's cool, but that's crazy. So I think that what would be amazing is if you could specialize while in PT school with a tract of some sort. And I know every professor kicks back on this because they're always like, you know, that one person who said she loves sports, now she's in peds. And they always say that. And they say that you're going to change your mind. But I do think, like, if we could have specialized in like an ortho sports tract in school, the value would be insane. And it would be almost like a mini residency type thing. If we're trying so hard to get respect like other doctoring professions, I think we have to have more information about the field that we are going into than just being like, well, I'm a doctor. Like, you took a semester of ortho. Like, we should do a little bit more. I think that would be an amazing thing in the future. I think as newer clinicians are phasing out older populations of professors, the evidence-based practice is, you know, making more of a forefront in PT school. Like, as all of us start to elevate in the profession and maybe eventually teach as well, I think that's going to help too. I just think there's a lot of stuff that's still being taught to an outdated board exam, and I think that's a problem. I think like memorizing ultrasound things for a board exam, I was like, excuse me. You know what I'm talking about. And I still don't know the pediatric reflexes, and I never will. So there's some things that could be tweaked, in my opinion. I know you both know what I'm talking about.
I'm laughing because I just tweeted this yesterday. Like,
yeah, there's some stuff, man, where I'm like, we're teaching to a test that was for the 80s when you could get reimbursed for putting heat on somebody. So it's just, the profession has grown so much. And I think that if we have any shot of showing our legitimacy, the education needs to come with it. I think that there's so much value to being able to have patients understand how much we know. But I do think a lot of it comes from after school, unfortunately. Like, I think that we grow so much as clinicians after the education side of it, which is sad. But and again, like, I had a phenomenal experience at UM. The professors are insanely good. I would argue probably more evidence-based than a lot of places, but there's still stuff where, like, I'm thinking back to some of my courses and we're talking about leg length discrepancy and SI joint movement, and I'm just like, what? So it's things that there's some catching up to do, but I guess it's like that in probably every profession. So hopefully things make a change. But I think it's up to our generation of PTs to make that change. So we got a lot to do.
I agree, but I think there's more people starting to understand that, and I think more people willing to embark on that journey, even though it's going to be a long one. But I think if we don't start it, then who is? You know, like, we can't wait on the next generation to try and pick up our profession when we can have a say in that right now.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Q.
I was gonna ask, how did you continue education after graduating, especially going on your own? Like, you really didn't have much like guidance or PTs to bounce ideas off of. How did you continue your education and get better at ortho?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely a lot of researching and articles myself. I think that was like the best thing ever, was me starting as somebody who I thought I was going to go into the research world. So, and I did a lot of research myself as an undergrad, thinking I was going to go the PhD route. I did research in PT school as well. And literally my job before PT school was in a lab. So I've always been comfortable with the research side of things, which I don't think is the same for everybody. I think it's really daunting for a lot of people, but I was lucky to have that background. So I was really comfortable with finding literature and diving in, and making sure that what I was doing was evidence-based and all of that. I also, with my background being in like strength and conditioning, I often kind of think of myself as a strength coach first that happens to have this really cool extra expertise in things that PT school teaches us. So a lot of what I think about is program design, periodization, progressive overload, things that what I would do for strength clients, but with the lens of injury. So that helped me a lot too, like just already being a strength coach and having like working one-on-one with a client as a strength coach is pretty similar to what we do as a PT. So that I think gave me an upper hand essentially of just being comfortable with everything. And then, reaching out, referring out, or asking questions when I needed it. There's a group of a lot of people in my class and a couple of the classes before me were doing things on their own, or at least part-time working somewhere, part-time doing things on their own. And I had this kind of like text thread with all of us outsiders, and we'd ask each other questions and bounce ideas off of each other and be like, oh, actually, I just read this article, this is perfect, or look at this person's Instagram, they deal with this stuff all the time, and just asking for help when needed, and knowing that like I don't have to know the answer to everything, I think is really important. And then from a continuing education standpoint, doing online courses when I could. I did there's a couple online courses that are, again, kind of like strength coach based, but then also PT, like lectures from PTs. So there's a few of those. I basically just pick things that kind of mimic what I think my practice looks like, or what I would want it to look like. Like I like the barbell medicine guys. I like compound performance. I like barbell rehab, barbell doc, all of that stuff, which is super in line. I like Mike Reinold. I like all of those people. So getting their newsletters, or there's Stronger by Science, which is basically just an email list, you guys know. So all of that stuff, I was just like, all right, let's figure this out. And that was hugely helpful.
Who are some of your biggest mentors in the PT world, strength world that you look up to, that you enjoy? You were kind of talking about barbell medicine and R2P and mentioned some of those names, but are there people that you really enjoy learning from?
So definitely the people that you mentioned. Some my own colleagues, for sure. I learned so much from them. Like I said, Tim did a really awesome sports residency. So he is like the guru for return to sport testing, everything. We pick his brain all the time. Hannah's a gymnast, so she sees such cool stuff. She works like pretty much with gymnasts and dancers. So we do our monthly lunch and learns, and we all talk about different cases. So that in itself is huge. And then in terms of people I really like, like online, everybody has their Instagram PTs that they like. Jason St. Clair, Dr. St. Clair on Instagram, he's probably one of my favorite PTs that I love seeing his content. He's a cash-based therapist as well on his own. His wife is a personal trainer too, like a strength coach. So between the two of them, they are very obviously movement-based, evidence-based, client relationship-based, and I just really, really respect everything that he does. He's somebody that I've always loved looking at his stuff. And there's a lot of, and I'm not even gonna be able to think of everybody right now, but there's a lot of the, I guess I would say kind of newer age clinicians that are very focused on putting the individual first. Like anybody who's doing stuff like that, I'm gonna like. But if you guys haven't seen, I think his Instagram is just like Dr. St. Clair or something. If you guys haven't seen his stuff, he's really, really excellent. He's kind of funny too, and he posts just little snippets into some of the evals he does with people, and some of like the exercise selection and thought process behind exercise selection. That's the stuff that I love to nerd out over. He's really great, so highly recommend.
Are you more of like a habits person, or you kind of just kind of go with the flow and see how things happen?
That's a good question. I think kind of both. I don't know. So is this like a personal life, or treatment life, or all of the above type question?
All of
Okay.
the above.
I think personal life, I like habits and I like my structure. And I have my walk planned for each day, my lift planned for each day. I get my food delivered, that kind of thing. In treatment life though, I think I'm a little bit more go with the flow, because I think if you're giving a really individualized experience, stuff's changing as you're working with somebody. And I think one of the most fun parts of treatment that I at least enjoy is like pivoting in the moment based on new information, based on what I'm seeing when a person's moving, and being like, oh, okay, cool, let's do this. So I think I always have like a general plan, but it tends to be more go with the flow. And I'm almost like reactive to the session in the moment, which is fun, and which is why being one-on-one is so amazing, because I have the bandwidth to be able to do that, and the time frame to be able to do that. But I definitely think in work life, it's a little bit more go with the flow, and that's probably why it's probably a product of our environment too, because we do tend to be pretty laid back. Like when we've had students kind of come and hang in shadow, you can tell they're kind of nervous at first. I'm like, just wait, everything is super chill here. It's going to be fun. Don't even worry about it. You have nothing to be nervous about. And we try to give that same experience to the patients as well. So that's where the go with the flow kind of comes in.
What would you say for your personal life, the two or three habits that you employ to have a successful day?
I won't say coffee, even though I want to say coffee. Definitely. Okay, so I've had a mindset shift as well, where I see a lot of patients, even though they're one-on-one, and it can be really long days. And I kind of used to like open my calendar and look at that and be like, whoa. Now I try really hard to plan out at least an hour break for eating and a walk, and an hour break for my lift. And I think a really like my most important practice is like taking back the day for myself. Whereas now I look at that and I'm like, I have a couple patients, I have my hour, I have my walk, I have a couple patients, I have my lift, I have a couple patients, instead of looking at it the opposite and thinking that I'm doing something for everybody else all day and then I've peppered in 1 hour for myself. So like taking back the day and feeling more in control of it helps me when I have a day of 11 patients, which is a long day. And it makes me feel so much better. So I guess it's kind of like a gratitude practice or mindset shift or whatever way you want to frame it with that. So that's huge, just taking back the day. And then definitely just movement. Like I feel so much better when getting my lift in, getting whatever my movement is for that day. Like there's no way that I will go through a week without planning that out. I write my own program for myself. I write it like I have a kind of skeleton of what I'm doing, but I have it week by week. On Sunday night, I sit down and I write it in my app for myself that I use for my clients. And I think it comes down to just making myself feel a little bit more in control. As you guys know, when we work in a profession where we're service facing and we're client facing, our day becomes about them, which is beautiful and it's great. And that's how we help people, but we can't help people if we are not taking care of ourselves. And I think anytime I feel that little inkling of like a burnout type sensation, I have to recenter myself and be like, all right, what are the things I'm doing today for me? And seeing the patients is just the cherry on the cake, but what am I doing, or cherry on ice, whatever they call that phrase. But the rest of it is for me.
I definitely like those. I do feel like going through the day, seeing a lot of patients, it's easy to feel burnt out. That's why I try to make it a point to like wake up early and do something for myself before I even go into the clinic.
Totally.
Because if I'm like miserable. But
Yeah.
I had a question, a little off topic of what we were just talking about. So since you're bringing on more people to your team and eventually looking to expand, what would you say is like the top qualities you're looking for in a PT?
Great question. I think this is a very general statement, but like personality is so important. Like I want somebody who adores being a PT and they're fun and they're excited, but they also have their own life. Like I want somebody who is motivated and hardworking, but is also silly. Like it's this right this specific blend of personality that I'm not going to necessarily see from a resume. Like I have to get that person in the clinic and I have to talk to them and see how they are. I do think it's kind of a mixture of like that outgoing personality, but they're also very focused and autonomous. So it's hard. I mean, we're really picky because we have to be, because I think it's such a key of everything. So definitely just that like personality, that standout type of personality. I think another thing would be like very just self-motivated and autonomous with their treatment. Like I want someone coming in here knowing that they're awesome and knowing that they're also working to be more awesome every day. Because it's not really a setting where, because we're busy and we have a ton of patients, where there's a ton of time for, I don't want to say hand holding because that sounds negative, but I want like someone to come in who knows how they want, like their treatment philosophy, their ideology, know that it's probably going to evolve and be like ready to go. So kind of like self-starter, self-motivator type person. Because when you have your caseload with us, like, because we're not shuffling patients around, like that's your caseload. It almost feels like it's your little business within the big business, because the patients now, they're asking for you, they love you, they want to work with you, they're referring people directly to you. So it's cool because it's, again, you get that experience of making a difference for your clients for sure. But it takes a self-motivated person, I think.
Especially with like as you're trying to expand and your culture that you guys have created already, if there's one person that doesn't fit, it can like ruin the whole thing.
Totally.
So it's so important to make sure that you have the right people. And like I was talking to Murph and he was talking about how he was telling me about the model you guys run, and I was like, oh, I see why you're going. It sounds like a great fit, and you sound like you'd be a great fit there. And I'm excited to see how he ends up when he moves out there, because I know he's been itching to get back to Florida.
I'm super excited as well. Yeah, I think that it's because it's a fast-paced the model, and I think you have to be pretty comfortable with, like we talked about earlier, and you said it really well, like meeting the patient where they're at and managing expectations and meeting them on that spectrum. I think you have to have that more of that new generation ideology of what PT is and what we're good at and what we can help people with. And it can be intimidating for some people for sure. But yeah, I think Ryan is a perfect fit. So I'm excited. Yeah.
Last question. Gonna ask before we start wrapping up. If you could give 2 to 3 takeaways from this conversation today, what would you say to anyone who listens to this conversation?
Ooh, they're great questions, guys. I would say to keep PT fun, right? Like I think so much like what you were just talking about as well, looking at your schedule and being like, oh my God. I think a little bit of the reframing of, again, having the time for yourself, and then also remembering, regardless of the setting, even if it's not the exact perfect setting that you see yourself in 10 years, or maybe you don't run a business yet, or maybe you never want to, but remembering like how uniquely cool our job is. We don't sit at a desk all day. We talk to different people all day. We're moving around all day. And we are helping people in their most vulnerable state of pain and earning their trust, earning their confidence, earning their companionship. Like that is so cool. And we're not on call. We don't have, other than, staying later for documentation and things that I think could be better in the profession, we don't have night shifts. We don't have crazy hours that, when you leave the clinic, you're still constantly thinking about work. Maybe sometimes we deal with a difficult case, but all in all, we have such a cool job. And there's a lot of things that could be better. There's a lot of things about education that could be better. There's a lot of things about reimbursement and insurance and clinic models that could be better. But ultimately, like, how cool is it to do what we do? I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's really easy to get caught up in all the ways that we want the profession to improve. And I'm one of those people for sure. But to remember, like, we have the coolest job ever. That's the first takeaway. And then I think the next takeaway would be, again, regardless of setting, like meeting your patient where they're at. So even if you're not in your dream setting yet, or even if you're not exactly where you want to be, I think that no matter what, like you can be the physical therapist that changes your patient's life, even if you don't have a squat rack in your gym. I think that's huge. I think that you can be the person that educates them on the importance of wellness and on loading and on resiliency and being strong and that they're not broken. You can do that from any setting ever and completely change their life. So I think those are the two things that come to mind.
Sheesh. All right, that was fantastic. You you killed that because you had so many things on here to bring it down to only two. Very well done. Katie, appreciate you coming on the pod. Where can people find you if they have questions?
Yes, my Instagram is just KT and then my last name, Dabrowski, Dabrowski. And then our gyms pages are Old Bull Athletics and Old Bull Sports Med.
Perfect.
So, or Sports Med and Rehab. I think it's in rehab.
we'll we'll tag all those in the show notes when this drops too.
Okay.
Key, anything you want to add?
No, just thanks for coming. I definitely learned a lot from you today, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was really fun. You guys ask awesome questions and make it easy to just talk openly. So I'm excited to see what other shows you guys put out. This was really fun.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Thank
you. On that note, this is another episode of the Key and Mang Audio Experience. We'll catch you on the next one.